In this video, we're going to take the house we created last time and add dimensions and labels to it. Dimensions are used to detail the sizes of our objects, from walls to doors, and the thickness of those objects. If we were to begin now to use dimensioning, we notice something is off. Our dimensioning style is extremely small, and it's not even in the proper units. This is displaying 288 inches from the interior edge of this wall to the interior edge of this wall. We're going to have to go in and change our dimensioning style. There's multiple ways to access the dimension styles. One of the easiest is to enter the command Dimstyle. It can also be accessed from the dimensioning toolbar. The default dimensioning style is standard and is the one that you saw me use to make that extremely small dimension. We're going to create an all-new dimension specific for our project, and we'll call it TICE dimension. It's okay to start with standard because we'll make a lot of changes. Now, all of the values that you see here are what were currently being used with the standard dimension. In order for it to be accurate and readable for us, we're going to need to scale it up a great deal. I've gone through and played around with the different settings and found that replacing many of these with 2 inches will make our dimensions readable at the scale we're currently working. Other things like text and arrow size can be even bigger, like 6 inches. In the top right corner of the Dimstyle, or the Dimensioning Style Manager, you'll notice the changes you've made in comparison to all the other values you've used. Now, because I've only changed certain values, it makes this dimensioning appear incorrect, but if we continue making our changes, it'll look uniform. We'll also want to make sure that our units are in the correct format, which is architectural. Architectural will display it as feet and inches, and use the precision of 1/16. We could even change ours to less, like 1/8 or 1/4. Everything else can be left as is, including the color of our dimensions, which will be by the block that we're using. Block is referring to the layer that we're currently on, which right now is the 0 layer, which is black, but we can change it later to our red dimensioning layer that we created earlier. Go ahead and select OK, and it will be able to use our dimensions we've just created. Go ahead and make sure that you're on the dimension layer, and start dimensioning the home. As far as which dimensioning tool to use, selecting the linear dimension will ensure that whichever point we're using, it'll only be according to an X and Y linear dimension. It's best practice to select the very edges of your dimension that you want to make. It leaves spacing between the dimension and the object we're dimensioning. Dimensionings can be adjusted by simply grabbing the grips and moving it to the desired position. Additionally, we can alter our full dimension by selecting the grip that is touching the object, and the dimension will change automatically. You can use My Dimension Layout to decide where and what dimensions you should place. Or you can simply start dimensioning and make sure that you dimension every wall. When dimensioning segments of a wall, like we've done here, make sure that your dimensions line up. We can then take and make an overall dimension for the full wall that rests above it. When dimensioning, make sure that the largest dimension is on the outside and any smaller dimensions are on the inside or lower. and the same is true on every edge. Other dimensioning types that we'll be able to use, especially with our angled wall that we have, is the aligned and angular dimensions. Aligned allows you to create a dimension that isn't based off of an x and y dimension, but specifically the endpoints. This can be really helpful when having multiple angled parts within our homes. Angular, as it sounds, allows us to choose two lines that have an angle between them to dimension them. Sometimes your dimensions won't fit exactly where you want them to. Just make sure that wherever your dimension is, try and keep it in the same room or space so that it's easier to read. It's okay if dimensions cross one another as long as they're still readable. Now we've finished all of the dimensions for this simple home. The last thing we're going to do in this video is briefly go over labels. Labels and notes are simply text that are placed on our model to help us understand what we're looking at. The easiest way to start a text is either through the text tool or by typing mtext. It'll ask for a first corner and a second point to give you the area that you'll be typing your text in. It'll then prompt you to start typing. Let's start with living room. Simply type living room, click outside of the typing space, and the text will appear. Now you'll notice that our text is extremely small, similar to the text that we saw with our dimensions. You can double-click and change the height of your text at any time. Let's change the height of our text to 1 foot. If you have your text selected, you can always click, hold, and drag it into position, or use the move command. We'll also want to make sure that this text is on our annotations layer. Because we don't ever want to confuse our dimensions with our annotations, we'll move this dimension so it's a little bit out of the way of our text. And now we have our completed home with accurate dimensions. In the next video, we'll go over adding doors and windows and introduce the idea of blocks.